All right, folks, hello. So in this video, we're going to talk about some of the articles that you're reading for quiz 2. And these articles are journal articles from academic journals, and they're available in your course pack. So if you scroll down to the bottom in iLearn, you can actually see the articles, and you can click them and read them, which you should do. And then you can look in the study guide that are mentioned there. And then also these PowerPoints should be in iLearn too. So I want to just talk about the articles and kind of go over them a little bit. So let's do that. And we can kind of go through everything that is involved. So let me bring up what I'm talking about. Okay. So let's start with hold on just a second. Just getting a little organized here. Bring up the articles. Not so much bring up the articles, but bring up the PowerPoint. Okay, let's start with let's go to the Perceptions of Social Influence article. And took a look at that one. Okay. All right. So the study you can find in iLearn in the course pack is called A Preliminary Examination of Perceptions of Social Influence in Group Decision Making in the Workplace. And it's by David Henningsen and Mary Henningsen. Okay. So first, before we do this, let's just unpack a little bit of this. Perceptions of social influence. Social influence refers to making other people do things using typically communication and your social status, I guess. We all talk about social influencers, and sometimes they're able to get us to do healthy things like, I don't know, exercising and eating well. And then sometimes they kind of lead us astray, like the fire festival. But anyway, it's, people getting other people to do things typically peacefully through communication. But sometimes they use the fact that they might be popular or well liked. So that's kind of what we're talking about here. So let's see what they studied. So the way they defined it is informational influence in groups represents an attempt to change the attitudes or behaviors of other people or other members based on their desire to make the best decision possible. So this is where informational influence is one way of doing things. So that's these actual data information. Like you can make a decision based on information and having information. So for example, if you're trying to make a decision about whether or not to take vitamin C to avoid getting a cold, there may be some data out there about the influence or the impact of vitamin C on colds. Maybe they have a study, for example, that it looked at people randomly that took vitamin C or didn't and how many colds they got a year. So that's informational influence. Basically, the data makes you do it, or it could be a spreadsheet or whatever. Informational influence, it says here, is best implemented by employing logical arguments, facts, and evidence indicating why various alternatives are stronger or weaker than others. In essence, informational influence relies on data and evidence to support a high-quality decision alternative. Okay, so these are data-driven decisions. Now, normative influence. Now, earlier, we were talking about normative influence, which is kind of like a type of social influence, where it's basically saying we should do something because everybody else is doing it. to a certain extent. It's like the bandwagon fallacy we were talking about in another video. Normative influences in groups, on the other hand, reflects the attempt to change the attitudes or behaviors of other members based on the group members' desire to belong to the group. So wanting to feel like you're part of the crew or, involved in the group. That can be a whole different story, right? Because you're doing something not because you have information or data to back up your choice, but just because you want to be part of the group. You want to feel that sense of groupness. You want to be part of the gang. You want to be part of the cult. You want to be part of the clique or whatever. Those types of things. All right. And then they say here, normative influence in practice involves indicating what behavior or attitude is desired by a majority of the group members and illustrating that resistance to those desires may lead to social disapproval or ostracism, while compliance with them will lead to acceptance and belonging. So like if you want to be cool, you have to do what everybody else says and be part of the group. And if not, you're going to be like ostracized or outside of the group. So this is really cliquish type stuff. So the hypotheses for the study were, number one, perceptions of normative influence will be negatively correlated with perceptions of quality of group decisions. And hypothesis two is perceptions of informational influence will be positively correlated with the perceptions of the quality of group decisions. So basically what that's saying is hypothesis one, perceptions of normative influence will be negatively correlated with perceptions of quality of group decisions. So if you're making a decision, what hypothesis one is saying is if you're making a decision based on being popular and being part of a group, you're probably not going to have a very high quality decision. And then hypothesis two, perceptions of informational influence will be positively correlated with perceptions of quality of group decisions. That is that if you make data-driven decisions, is what hypothesis two says, instead of worrying about being part of a group or being cool or part of a clique, you'll make higher quality decisions. And that's what everybody agreed with. And those two hypotheses were basically supported. I would say everybody, but well, the majority supported it. So what it's saying is people think that better decisions are made when you base them on data rather than trying to be part of the group or trying to be included in the group and be part of the cool clique or the cool cult or whatever. And yeah, so you'll get better decisions from information, but based as opposed to trying to just be part of a group. So this kind of runs in the face of basically it's saying that people don't really like peer pressure and they don't like the, doing something just because you want to be part of the group. People don't like that and they don't think that it makes for good decision making. And that's no big surprise. What's interesting about that is that we all know that people do actually give in to what groups want of them. And they'll actually like be, I guess you could say, vulnerable to try to make their decisions based on how people want them to make their decisions. And it's an interesting dynamic that goes on with that, I think. Yeah, it's unfortunate actually, but like if you look at The Breakfast Club, for example, the Claire character talks about how many decisions are made, because you want to be cool and you want to be part of a group, even though from an informational standpoint, she'd like to be more open-minded and maybe be friends with people outside of her clique. So, we know people feel this way. They know that quality decisions are better if the quality of decisions is higher if they make information on data rather than trying to be cool or be part of a group. But we all know that people fall into that. So, yeah. So that's that study. Now there's another study actually that is also mentioned. So that also, this is the other study that you're going to be reading. Again, this study can be found, if you look at your course pack, which is at the bottom of iLearn, you can read it over and get all the information there about this article, and you can read it over and you can take a look at the quiz study guide too. So this one's saying the title is Group Communication and Communication Styles and Analysis of Multicultural Teams and Decision-Making Meetings. So they had, looks like they had a few research questions here, quite a few. Are there any differences in the participation and contribution patterns of homogeneous groups composed exclusively of US-born speakers and those composed of those from East Asian cultures? So the participation means how much talking you do and how much you actually speak during a presentation, or excuse me, during a meeting, as opposed to just staying quiet. So do people that are US born versus people born in East Asian cultures, born in East Asian cultures, have differences in their participation? And RQ2 is, or research question 2 is, are there significant differences in the participation and contribution patterns of US-born speakers and those from East Asian cultures in heterogeneous groups? In other words, does team composition have an effect on the participation and contribution of speakers of East Asian language and native speakers of English? Yeah, so like if there's if the group is heterogeneous, meaning it's mixed in the sense that it's a mixture of US born and non-US born speakers, what does that affect participation? As opposed to the big group being homogeneous, where there's, everybody in the group is born in the US, or everybody in the group is East Asian. So that's the homogeneous. So comparing those two. And then the research question 2A, which is sort of a sub question, is how do discourse styles change when we add a few members, a minority, or other culture to the group? And research question 2, how do discourse styles change when the majority of the group is of another culture? All right, so that's the study, and you can read all about it in that PDF, which is available in the course pack. Okay. How did they get their data? Our data set consists of transcripts of videotaped recordings or of simulated small group decision-making meetings conducted in English. Okay, so they have videotapes of people meeting. And everybody speaks English in these groups, just so you know. The findings were differences in discourse patterns do emerge when members are combined in mixed groups. So there were differences. When you put non-native speakers together for foreign-born with individuals who are born here in the United States, you get differences. And to be specific, Americans tend to increase their participation while East Asians withdraw. So when you mix Americans with East Asians, this is a quote from them, the East Asians withdraw, meaning they're more quiet. So the East Asians are more quiet when they're mixed in a group with Americans, and the Americans tend to talk more, and the East Asians are more quiet and talk less in that circumstance. So that was the finding there. What does it all mean for this study? Basically, I think the main thing is, the best way to combat misunderstandings is, through information. And so if you are to, you might be in a group, and maybe hypothetically, let's say you're American born and you're meeting with a group of East Asians and they are quiet, you might notice that like there's a mixture of Americans and East Asians. If the East Asians are more quiet, you just know that that's kind of that's what this study found too as well. So it's not unusual. It's not about those individuals. It's something that there is a trend. The flip side of that is if you are a person that speaks English as a second language and is East Asian, and you find yourself being quiet in a mixed group with Americans, just also know that that's what this study found too, and it's part of what the study says happens, and you're not unusual. It's just kind of the trend that happens there. And so just knowing that that's the trend, and it's researched studies, there's research on it, that's really what we've got going on there. So check out the article for more details, but basically what it's, it's just a lot of times I think racism and cultural imperialism and just general discrimination, all that happens when people don't understand each other. And this is just sort of showing what the trends are. And once people realize that, these are the trends, it doesn't mean everybody's going to do this thing or behave in this particular way. It just means that that could be a trend. And it's out there. It's that's the trend that this research found, for what it means. But that's the main thing, is to not stereotype people, of course, and not be racist and not be discriminatory. And also don't be frustrated when people are different from each other. They just are. They're different ways of people being. And of course, this is just a study on, this group of people that they found. It doesn't mean it's going to apply to every single East Asian person or every other single American person either. It's just what this particular study has found. So take a look at it, check out the study, see what you think of it, etc. That will, that'll give you some information about this whole thing. I definitely think that, the key is to not to discriminate against people because they're different from you, or judge them because they're different from you, but just to know kind of some of the trends. And the trends change. Things change over time too, and not everybody will necessarily fit into these boxes that are described here. So take a look at the study for more details, and email me if you have any questions. Yeah, so those are some things. Let us see what else we have here. Okay, so let's look at the study guide for quiz 2 and see what they're actually asking us about this. Perceptions of social influence. It asks you, what is informational influence? Well, we talked about that, so you can look back at the article and take a look at that. But that's informational influence is when you make a data-based decision. What is normative influence? This is when you make a decision because you want to be kind of like everybody else and be part of the group. What impact did the two variables above have on perceptions of decision-making influence? That there is it was clear that people did not like it when people were making decisions based on being popular or being part of the group, but liked it better when people were, I guess you could say, doing data-driven decisions. It kind of goes against that whole idea of being part of a high school clique and trying to do what everybody else thinks is cool, or trying to be part of the group and make a decision based on that. How did they measure the above variables? They actually used a survey to measure it, and you can see information about in the article about that. And were the hypotheses supported? Yes, they basically supported their hypotheses that people, like I said earlier, they figured out that people did not think it was a high quality decision if it was made for normative reasons, meaning trying to be part of the group and trying to be included in the group. And people were more supportive and thought it was a higher quality decision if it was a data-driven or information-driven decision. So yeah, so that's the answer to that question based on that. Next up, going back to this next article, multicultural teams. What were the research questions? And you can see that in my PowerPoint. You can take a look at all the research questions. There's lots of research questions, but basically what they're talking about is if we mix people together, does that affect the way they communicate? And the data set was interviews primarily, and questionnaires. And videos. That's the main thing, though. They had the videos. When I say the data set, really what I'm talking about is the videos. That was the main data set. The other stuff was just preliminary. And then what did the researchers discover? Were there discourse patterns when members are combined or in mixed groups? And the main thing is if you put people in a mixed group, what they found was the foreign-born individuals were quieter than the Americans. And like we talked about earlier, American-born individuals. You could be American without being born here, obviously. So what they found was that they were quieter, and like I said earlier, the key here is to not be discriminatory and not be racist, and to be open-minded, and there's nothing wrong with being quiet necessarily, but just to understand why that quietness might be happening, and that quietness might not be an across the board thing. It might be that you're mixing together people from different backgrounds, in this case foreign-born English speakers versus American-born English speakers, and that the foreign-born English speakers were a little quieter when they were put in a mixed group with American-born English speakers. And again, it's about like not being judgmental, not being racist, not being discriminatory, being open-minded, not being judgmental, and then when you see people being quieter, just know that that could be, we don't know why for sure, but know that that could be part of the trend that's described in the article. And then not also really important is that not everybody is going to, just because they're foreign-born East Asian, doesn't mean they're going to fit into that category, because that's what they found were the trends. However, we can't apply that to a specific individual automatically. We can't assume that somebody's going to do one thing or another just because they're part of a group, and otherwise that would be stereotyping, which is also bad. So don't be racist, don't be stereotypical. But if you read the article, you can see kind of the research this is done. A lot of people make a lot of generalizations about people, and this is actually measured research with video, and they're actually measuring it and measuring about amount of talk with a stopwatch and stuff. So hopefully that all makes sense. If it doesn't, email me, I'll try to explain it. But that'll get to the questions that you're studying for your quiz. I think you'll find it interesting articles, these two articles. Again, they're at the bottom of the course pack, they're research articles. And the reason we look at these things is because, like, you guys are going to be, looking at your textbook. The textbook is usually made up of these types of articles. Hey, how's it going? So yeah, email me if you have any questions. Thanks so much.